Hello everybody, welcome to the Comic Gamer Movie Show. My name is Deshaun and today I am here to talk about the X-Men. Now, as many of you know, a lot of the strikes are coming to an end, particularly the writer's strike, or at least they're not coming to an end, but the voting for these proposals of these deals are pretty much guaranteed to happen. I believe most of these votes for these deals to get done need like 51% or something like that. And most likely they're gonna get way over 51. So the strikes are basically over. They're over to the point where the guilds are basically start telling people to get back to the work. And obviously, when something like this ends, or something like a writer's strike or a strike that's been going on for months at a time, and you're gonna start getting a shit ton of news. You're gonna start getting a shit ton of stuff. And I already said, I was like, I can't wait. I was like, there's two things I'm anticipating hearing a lot of conversation about. Well, one is X-Men, and two is Spider-Man. Tom Holland, not that long ago, already said that they were already talking about Spider-Man 4, but they had to stop, obviously, because of the actor and writer's strike. So they legally couldn't really talk about it anymore. Obviously, with some other projects like Deadpool and whatnot, there's a lot of projects that were put on hold, and a lot of projects that were like in development that were put on hold. That now are continuing. And one of the things that came out around yesterday is Marvel/Disney are now taking pitches for their X-Men movie, or at least for the first X-Men movie, with a lot of the pitches, apparently, a lot of the news around it being that Wolverine will not be in the first X-Men movie. Yes, the most iconic X-Man won't be a part of the movie. And I'm here to tell you why that's a good idea. This video basically is why Wolverine shouldn't be in the first X-Men movie, or the first MCU X-Men movie. And me, personally, I love Wolverine. If you've been watching my channel long enough, you know Wolverine is my all-time favorite comic book hero. I love the duality of him. I'm the type of person who loves it when my hero has an edge, a dark edge to them. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Captain America, I love Spider-Man, and I love a lot more, patriotic, more characters. I do. I love characters who do the right thing and whatnot. But the thing is, my favorite type of characters typically are good guys. They are good guys with a darker edge. It's like when push comes to shove, they'll do what they gotta do. And Wolverine is the ultimate when push comes to shove, I do what I gotta do character. There's something beautiful about that character. And I know a lot of people like Wolverine because he's the antithesis of the anti-hero. He is the gruff, the tough, the grizzled, smoking the cigar, hair on his chest, beard. He's the epitome of the manly man, archetypal anti-hero-ish character in the vein of Clint Eastwood's movies like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He really is built like a Clint Eastwood-like character, a modern-day cowboy, a Ronin. Like, I love these aspects about him. But the thing I love about Wolverine the most is the fact that there's a beauty to the fact that despite all the pain he's been through, despite all the shit he's been through, despite all the things he's done, despite all the things that's happened to him, he still believes in humanity, he still believes in good, and he still fights for good. He hasn't let it corrupt him completely. He understands the realities of the world, but he accepts it, and he accepts that some motherfuckers gotta die. But he also accepts that sometimes things can work out. There's this interesting duality to Wolverine that I've always loved. But the fact of the matter is, Wolverine is not an original X-Men member. Anybody who's ever read Marvel, who knows anything about Marvel, knows that he was not an original X-Men member. The original X-Men were let me see. It was Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Beast, before he was Beast, before the fur and stuff, he was just this monkey-looking dude. He was just this dude that had, monkey feet and was, athletic. Iceman, and Jean Grey, but she was called Marvel Girl at the time. That was the original X-Men, with Charles Xavier scooting around in his little wheelchair. That was the original X-Men. I believe they're called, not Astonishing X-Men. Astonishing, I think, is when they brought in Storm and Wolverine and goddamn Nightcrawler and shit and Colossus. Then it became I believe that's Astonishing. I can't completely remember off the top of my head, but I do know the OG X-Men, Wolverine wasn't involved in it. And they tried to do that with First Class. First Class, they actually tried to replicate that with all the members being basically the OG, you know, with like Beast and like they tried to kind of replicate that with First Class. They took their own approach to it, but they tried to kind of replicate the fact that Wolverine is not an original X-Men member, and that there are so many X-Men members that are... That's the thing about the X-Men in general, about most of the teams in Marvel. Most of the teams in Marvel have this going for them, that each member of the team has an entire story, an entire backstory, an entire arcs dedicated to them and what they're doing. I mean, Nightcrawler is, spoiler, the son of fucking Mystique, and you got Scott, aka Cyclops, whose dad is a space pirate and his brother's a space emperor. Like, there's a lot of Jean Grey in the Phoenix Force, Storm and her former rule as queen of basically a massive chunk of Africa, because she was, you know, they celebrated her as a fucking goddess, which makes sense. Like, there's a lot of stories. And unfortunately, in a lot of the Fox movies, particularly the ones with Hugh Jackman in it, it always centered around Wolverine, which makes sense. He's the most popular character. Hugh Jackman was, outside of Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, probably the most recognizable actor in those movies. So it did make sense. I mean, Halle Berry, obviously, but, you know, she didn't really... I didn't hate Halle Berry's performance as Storm. I know a lot of people do, but I didn't hate her performance as Storm. I thought she did an admirable job, though I would love to see a more accurate depiction of Storm one day. Hopefully we will. But I digress. Like, the fact of the matter is, Wolverine did take up a lot of screen time. I love the character, and I love his parts in first one, and all his performances, almost. But admittedly, he did take up a lot of screen time. He did take up a lot of shine from the other characters. It was like one of those things where it's like, you know, it'd be like watching a Guardians movie and the entire... Which they do technically do that. Someone has to be the lead, and Peter Quill technically was the lead in the first two Guardians movies. But still, like, it'd be like as if... Yeah, it'd be like as if Rocket was just the entire movie. Like, every movie revolved around something that happened to Rocket. And that's kind of what happened in the X-Men movies. So I don't blame them for not... If Marvel... I think it's a good idea for Marvel not to have Wolverine involved in... I don't know about having him involved in the first few movies. I would introduce him. Honestly, personally, I would introduce Wolverine completely separate from the X-Men. I would introduce him as a mutant. I'd introduce him in the MCU. I'd introduce him separate from the X-Men in a different context. Maybe he's on Madripoor. Maybe he's working, maybe he's like an agent for Nick Fury. Something. But I would find a different way to introduce him than introducing him in the context of the X-Men. I don't think I would do the whole him, like, I don't know if I'd go with showing him breaking out and shit. I'd have him already broken out and him just chilling, doing his thing. I would almost have it like the first X-Men movie. I thought the first X-Men movie handled that well with, like, they didn't go into context of what happened to him. Like, he's just out, he's just fighting in these cells, he's out and about, doing his thing, and then he runs into the X-Men and he joins them. They have common goals, and he joins them. And I would replicate that, basically. I might do it a bit differently, obviously. You don't want to completely rip off that first X-Men movie. But I would have him introduced in some other context, in some other movie. I'd have him be a friend of a friend. Hell, he could be an old friend of the Red Guardian. You know, you can have Alexi, aka Red Guardian, be like, man, I knew this dude, man. His name was Logan. He was a cool fucking dude. Man, he had these claws. He was hardcore. Like, you could introduce him somewhere else and then have him eventually join the X-Men. Have him get the suit and everything when he joins the X-Men. I would have the movies building up to Wolverine finally joining the X-Men and being the full-fledged X-Men member. But in the meantime, I'd have those movies focus on other characters. First of all, if I were Marvel, and I don't know if they're going to do this or not, the fact of the matter is diversity is a big thing in Hollywood. It's a big thing in the movie industry. It's a big thing in Hollywood. Diversity has essentially turned the Fast and Furious movies into a billion-dollar franchise. Believe it or not, that's pretty much what happened. You think they have all these different fucking races and colors for nothing? It really helps when you're selling it to different markets when you have diversity. And one thing that Marvel wants to crack into, Marvel/Disney really wants to have an individual character represent every individual and make money off of that, so that they don't leave any avenue of money on the table. Fuck that shit. Like, fuck that shit. You want to get a gay character so you can get their money. You want to get a Latina character so you can get their money. You want to get some white guy characters so you can get their money. You want to get some black characters. You want everybody's fucking money. So you got to diversify. And the X-Men, nothing more diverse than the X-Men. They're just naturally diverse, by just the fucking way that they're made. So I personally would center the movie on Jubilee, an Asian American character. because depending on how you want to do this movie, the X-Men movie, if you want them to all be gathered, like you want Storm and Jean and Scott and them to be gathered already, you know, like the Xavier Institute is already a thing, and like they're already together, the X-Men is a thing that's formed, then you need a character where you can see it through their eyes, which I think they're going to do that. Feige has kind of basically said he's done with origin stories. And if you notice, he really meant that shit. He hasn't done an origin story in a while. Shang-Chi and Eternals weren't origin stories. The shit already happened. Now, they went back, they had flashbacks to show you things that had already happened, but it wasn't a tradition. None of those movies weren't traditional origin stories. Marvel has pretty much said they're kind of done with traditional origin stories. They don't do that anymore. Like, they might make a movie that talks about the past. You know, also, like, Miss Marvel was basically the last time they did a traditional origin story. They don't do that. So you have to assume that the X-Men aren't going to be an origin story. It's not going to be a story about Charles collecting all the X-Men members, probably not. He's probably going to have an X-Men team already assembled. It's probably going to be Jean, Cyclops, Storm, maybe Beast. Jean, Cyclops, Storm, Beast, and like, I don't know, maybe Gambit. It's going to be a team already in place, which if I were them, that's how I would play it. If I were them, I would have it centered around Jubilee. I'd have Jubilee join this team. I'd have her be like, whoa, this is crazy, this is weird, you know, this is nuts. And I'd have the whole thing through her eyes, and through her experiences, I'd have her ask all the questions that we all wonder. Where have you been? Who are these mutants? Why have no one ever heard of you? Like, so you have a character who can ask those questions. Plus, Jubilee's always been she's been an up and down in popularity character. Her superpowers are weird. It's technically fireworks. But like most X-Men members, like, there's more to her powers than meets the eye. Like, yeah, technically Jubilee's power is fireworks. But there's a lot of fucking scary, dangerous things you can do with a firework if you can make it go off powerful enough. I mean, shit. You set off enough fireworks, you can burn a fucking building down. You know what I mean? So there's more to her powers than meets the eye. And I can definitely see them doing that. At least that would be my approach. Is I would already have the X-Men team assembled, and I would tell the entire story through a new person's perspective, aka probably Jubilee. I might have a hint to Miss Marvel somewhere in there, since Miss Marvel is now a mutant, particularly in the MCU. So, I mean, they could, and I know that's going to piss some people off, which is why I didn't suggest this. They could very easily have that character be Miss Marvel. They could very easily have the movie center around Miss Marvel coming into the X-Men's world and being introduced to all of this X-Men and mutants and all this, the new Charles Xavier and all this stuff, and have it be a character that we already know and like and is established being introduced to all this. They could easily do that. I don't know if they will. I don't know if they would. I wouldn't mind it, but I know some people would. But personally, I think it's a good idea not to have Wolverine near this first movie. I think you should introduce him in his own project. That's kind of like off to the side, has nothing to do with this X-Men. And I think you should have the entire X-Men team most of the X-Men team assembled, and you should have a character, maybe Miss Marvel or Jubilee, as the character we get to watch this world, this introduction of this world through her eyes. I think that's a good idea. But anyways, thank you guys for joining the Comic Game Movie Show again. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.